5090 level biology, November 2015, paper 1, 2, first 21 questions we're going to discuss in this video. Question 1. Which diagram shows the positions of the chloroplast and the nucleus in a cell? Now you know this is the central vacuole, which they've shown this place here. Here they've shown no central vacuole, and here this is the central vacuole. Now the chloroplasts are not inside the central vacuole. So you can see these black dots which they have shown you are the chloroplasts because there are number of chloroplasts inside and it's in the cytoplasm. And this shaded structure which they have shown you is the nucleus because the nucleus is bigger than the chloroplast. Please remember that. So the nucleus here is in the cytoplasm, and here the nucleus is inside the vacuole or some sort of a vacuole in which the chloroplasts are surrounding it. So you see this was all wrong. D was wrong. B was wrong because the chloroplasts were inside the vacuole. A was wrong because the nucleus was inside the vacuole. So that is why C is correct, and they've given you nucleus and chloroplast, which they gave you in the key, so you had to figure that out. Question 2. How do plants absorb by active transport? Against a concentration gradient using energy. Now here there were other answers which were incorrect. Against a concentration without using energy, everybody knows active transport energy is needed for active transport. Down a concentration gradient, that means high concentration to low concentration using energy, again it's wrong because active transport is from low to high. And down a concentration, again high to low without using energy. So in this, down a concentration gradient was both wrong. So this is how you figure it out, that which are the totally wrong ones, and then you narrow down on the two, which was A and B, and A was the correct answer. Then coming to the third question, the diagram shows the net movement of water by osmosis between four adjacent cells. Which cell has the highest water potential? So what we need to understand is that if say C has 100 free water molecules, that means D has 80 free water molecules. So that's why movement is from 100 free water molecules to 80 free water molecules. And then from 80 it moves to 60. So 60 from here, 100 to 60 and 80 to 60 and 100 to 60. And then from 60 here the water molecules will be less. So it is moving from 80 to 40 and then 60 to 40. So this is how, because what highest water potential means the number of free water molecules. The number of free water molecules. Now this is defines the water potential. More the free water molecules means less the solute. So more the free water molecules, more the water potential. So the highest potential would be of C because they're moving from C to D and C to B and D to B and then B to A and D to A. So it's a very simple way to remember it. Okay, 100 free water molecules here, so 80 free water molecules here, so 60 here, 40 here, and that is how they're moving from a higher water potential to a lower water potential. So highest water potential to lower water potential. And this is something which we need to understand in the questions on osmosis. 4, the diagram represents an enzyme and 4 molecules A, B, C, and D. Which molecule is the substrate of this enzyme? Now you can see, it has to be something which is complementary to it. So look at all these shapes and look at all these shapes and then look at all these shapes. So anything which is complementary to it, and then of course you have to understand is that there has to be a fit. So you have to see there is a little structure like this, then the deep structure, there's a V, and then there's a little structure here. So there has to be 3. Now this is not going to fit in because you see, look at this point here, and then look at this one here, and then look at this one has got 1, 2, 3, but then look at the shape of it, and this one of course has the shape is very, very, very. So which molecule is the substrate of this enzyme? So which molecule is the substrate of this enzyme? That answer was A, and that is why, because it was complementary to the active site of the enzyme. Then coming on to question number 5, the diagram shows the upper layers of a leaf. What are the structures labeled X and Y? Now X is a non-cellular layer. Now that has to be the cuticle. And Y, this double line that they show you, is the cell wall, which is made up of cellulose. which is a carbohydrate. So X is the cuticle and Y is the cell wall. So the answer to this was D. And coming on to question number 6, a variegated plant is de-starched and then placed in the sunlight for several hours. The leaf is then taken and tested for starch using iodine solution. Which diagram shows the correct results? You see, the area green should be colored what? That green area should contain starch, so it should be colored black. And the white area does not contain any chlorophyll. The green area contains chlorophyll, so that can photosynthesize. That's going to turn black with iodine because starch present in it will turn black with iodine. And the brown area would be the white area which you put iodine because iodine's color is brown, so it will remain brown. So the answer to that was C. Then coming on to question number 7. A container is filled with water from a lake and placed on an outside table in the sunlight. Healthy plant seedlings are placed in the container and left for 3 months. Distilled water is added to the container as required. At the end of each month, the typical mature leaf grown during the previous 30 days is removed and drawn to the same scale. The diagram shows the 3 drawings that are made. Why is the leaf from month 3 the smallest? So first we take a container and we fill it with water from a lake and is placed on an outside table in the sunlight. And healthy little plant seedlings are placed in the container and left for 3 months. That's 90 days. Distilled water is added to the container as required. So now we are not adding the water from the lake, but we're just adding distilled water which does not contain any nitrates or any phosphates, because in a lake there would be of course many animals and decomposing matter. And distilled water is added to the container as required. At the end of each month, the typical mature leaf grown during the previous 30 days is removed and drawn to the same scale. So you can see this third month one, which is at the end of each month. So this would be at the end of the 90 days. This would be at the end of 30 days. This would be at the end of 60 days. Why is the leaf from month 3 the smallest? You see, it can't be insufficient light for photosynthesis because it was placed in, it says it was placed in sunlight. So this is wrong. Nitrates from the water had all been absorbed. Yes, because you're just adding distilled water and whatever nitrates that might have been in the lake water. So this was the correct answer. But phloem vessels were unable to transport water. Why? Why? There's no reason why the phloem stops transporting, and plants cannot grow without soil. Then how did they grow at the end of 30 days, and at the end of 60 days we still had the leaves? But the leaves were just smaller. So it is 33 months. Its new leaves must have developed. So if they were not grown, they should have died on the first day. They are still living for the last 3 months, that is 90 days. So please understand this, how this question had to be thought about and how this question had to be worked out. Now for question 8 is an exam report comment which I would like to read to you, which I disagree with. It says candidates found the question challenging. They had to recognize that amylase is a protein and therefore built up from amino acid units. And the most popular wrong answer was urea, which is produced as a result of the breakdown of amino acids. It cannot be said to be built up from them. Candidates must read the question carefully. Now, I don't agree with the fact that you don't read the question carefully. It's because you don't know biology. Frankly speaking, it's not reading the question, it's not knowing actually what biology is all about. Now we know large molecule built up from amino acid. Now the only answer to that is proteins. Now why would anyone think of urea? The student who does not actually know biology would think of urea, because he is now thinking, he maybe has heard in some class or in some lecture that deamination takes place and the excess amino acids, the amino part removed and converted to urea. So the information that he has, his knowledge is very patchy, and she's just remembering a few words from a few lectures which he must have heard. But actually that student does not know biology. So I don't agree with the exam report. Candidates must read the question carefully. I think it's just children don't know actually biology, and that is why they would give an answer of urea. Any kid who knew the actual thing is, of course, would never come up with this sort of an answer that urea. We know that excess amino acids are deaminated, but the question said, which is a large molecule built up from amino acids? So I'll say, okay, when you put pages together, what do you come up with? Well, you say you'll come up with a copy or a register or a sort of a science booklet or a copy or something to write your notes on. So question number 9, each part of the alimentary canal has the optimum pH for the enzymes that digest food there. What is the optimum pH for an enzyme that works in the stomach? That's a very low pH, and that could have only been 2. All these others were 2. This is neutral, this is more than neutral, this is alkaline. So the answer was A. This was a very clear-cut answer. I think everybody should have guessed it. Question 10. Which features make a villus well adapted for absorbing amino acids from the ilium? Large surface area to volume ratio, so they're very small. So large surface area to volume ratio, good blood supply, and thin walls. You see, small surface area would have all been wrong because for absorption you need a large surface area. So you only have to figure out between uh, large surface area. So large surface area was A and B. Why was A wrong? Because I'm sorry, amino acids do not enter. The important word here was lacteals. For L for lacteals, L for lipids. Only the lipids enter the lacteals. And then the lacteals become the lymphatics. So all L's. Lymphatics, lipids, lacteals. Then coming to question number 10. So samples of 4 different tissues are removed from the same plant. The concentration of water in each of the 4 tissues is measured. So 4 different tissues are removed from the same plant. Which tissue is likely to have the highest water concentration? So leaf epithelium, leaf mesophyll, root epidermis, and xylem. Naturally, xylem is the tubes which are going to transport water, so they would have the highest water content. The root epidermis cell has cytoplasm which has 70% water. The leaf mesophyll also is a cell, so it would have cytoplasm and it would have 70% water, but xylem is just a tube filled with water. So that was how you had to figure this out for question 11. Question number 12, which is again mentioned in the examiner's report. The diagrams show a plant in a flask of water. It is left in the light at 16 degrees Celsius for 6 hours. Now look at the mass. This is through 326.75. The whole plant with the flask, with the water, with the layer of oil, with the cotton wool, with the leaves has now become 321.75. So it has lost 5.0 grams has decrease in 5 grams of mass of both of everything, the water, the glass, the flask, the cotton wool, the leaves. So what explains the changes in the mass? So it couldn't have been absorption of water into the root hairs. Yes, the water is still there. We are measuring the mass has decreased. Evaporation of water from the flask, how could that explain? There's a layer of oil on top of it. Photosynthesis in the leaves of the plants, but that's using up the water. It's making glucose and oxygen, and transpiration from the leaves of the plant, that is the one. You see, the water vapors which have first evaporation had to take place, and then the water vapors had to diffuse out of the plant. Now that would result in loss or decrease in mass. So what explains the change in mass after 6 hours? That's what the question. Change in mass after 6 hours. Now that's a very important habit which you must develop. You know, some of you come in A levels and say it's very difficult. It's because you've not had the right uh, study habits. You don't have the right study habits. That's why you complain about the exams being tough or the studies being tough in A levels. So, question number 13. The diagram shows chemicals being exchanged between some cells and a blood capillary. What could be the identities of chemical P and Q? Chemical P and Q is something which is diffusing from the plasma, the blood plasma, into the cells, and the other one is from the cells into the blood, the plasma. So glucose and oxygen and carbon dioxide and water. P has to be glucose and oxygen, which is entering the body cells. And this was, of course, the blood capillary, which is a one cell thick layer. And you can see this one cell thick, the cells lining it. So one cell thick layer of the capillary, and these are the exchange between some cells. So these are the body cells, which would be anywhere in the body. They haven't specified that in the question. So P had to be glucose and oxygen and carbon dioxide and water, because that is the process which is used in aerobic respiration, and that results in the production of carbon dioxide and water, and energy is released. So question 14 was wrong by a number of students. Why? Because you're not clear again on the subject. In the human circulatory system, what causes the transfer of materials from the capillaries to the tissue fluid? So these are the capillaries. Yeah, so a capillary has an arterial end and a venous end, right? Now in the arterial end, all arteries arise from the aorta. Aorta rises from the left ventricle, and a high pressure is generated by the left ventricle wall. So why would materials from the capillaries into the tissue fluid? Tissue fluid is outside the cells of the body. It's called tissue fluid. So that has to be blood pressure. Can't be active transport, can't be capillarity, can't be osmosis, because even glucose diffuses out, even oxygen diffuses out. So it had to be blood pressure. Why? Because the arterial end of the capillary is, the blood is at a very high pressure. Because as I said, all arteries arise from the aorta. Aorta arises from the left ventricle, and the wall of the left ventricle is very, very thick, so exerts a lot of force on it. This was again wrong by the majority of students, got this wrong, sadly. And coming on to question number 15, the graph shows the death rates from coronary heart disease in two different countries. Now, these are the questions I was asked by a student the other day on WhatsApp, is that they find it difficult to do these questions. And I said to them, well, actually, because you don't know how to actually read these questions. The graph shows the death rates from coronary heart disease in two different countries. So there's a country X and there's a country Y. First, let's look at that. There are two countries. Then we have males and females. Now, let's read the question to ourselves. Country X, the males were how many? It was nearly about 25. 25 deaths from coronary heart disease per 100,000 of the population. In country Y, well, how many were the, sorry, these are the females, not the males. So the females that died were 25 per 100,000 in country X. In country Y, the females were nearly 90. So 90 females per 100 deaths, and say 25 females per 100 deaths in country X. But the males, let's look at the males now. The males in country X were nearly 50. But the males in country Y were nearly sort of maybe 140. So 140 deaths. So a total of, if we say 140 plus 90 would be 230, and here it would be 50 and 25, so 75. So country X 75, country Y 190, 230. So number one, the males and the females are both are more deaths in country Y from coronary heart disease per 100,000 of the population. What could not explain the difference between the two countries? If the number of people dying from coronary heart disease, and we say that it is a result of smoking, so less smoking in country X, yes, fine, I agree with it. Lower average age in country X. What could not explain the difference between the two countries? Yes, that could. But why is it C? Why is the answer C? More males in country Y. Because look at the males, they were 50. Here it's 140. And what does it say? What could not explain the difference between the two countries? Why would we say more males in country Y? Were there more men? It says an equal proportion of men and women. in both countries. So death rates couldn't be just that the more men and the women are dying of some disease and there are less women in that country, and in that country more men are present. So that is why this was a difficult question, I agree with, but this is something which it says not explain the difference. You see, these other factors were all less smoking. Yes, smoking results in coronary heart disease, lower average age, people dying early, more saturated fats eaten, more coronary heart disease. But more males, there's no incidence that, women will die of coronary heart disease, so there'll be less women in a country and there'll be more men, so those men will die of coronary heart disease. So please understand the question and try to, sort of give it your best shot. But some questions are just very difficult and it's not very easy to find an answer to it. Then coming on to question number 16. Another thing which the exam report says about question 15 is interpreting the data was a challenge. A country with a lower age profile is likely to have a lower rate of coronary heart disease. On the other hand, more males in a country will have no effect on the percentage of males who suffer from CHD, from coronary heart disease. So this is the explanation given in the exam report, and I thought I would read it out to you. What happens to the diaphragm? Question 16. What happens to the diaphragm and the external intercostal muscles when breathing in? Diaphragm muscle contracts and the external intercostal muscle both contract. So this will increase the volume, pressure will decrease, and air will move in from high pressure, from the outside high pressure to the inside low pressure. Then question 17. The pie chart shows the proportion of gases in samples of dried, inspired, and expired air. So dried means that there are no water vapors. Now one had to be nitrogen, so it was either A or B. And then because that's 78% and 20% is oxygen, so nitrogen 1 in segment 2. In segment 2 was oxygen, which is the one which was labeled 2. And then of course segment 3, which was little one, the smaller one here, in expired air, that was more, so that was the carbon dioxide and other gases. So that was a little confusing for some of the students, but otherwise I think everybody should have figured that out. That was nitrogen, oxygen, and other gases. Then coming on to question 18, again this is mentioned in the exam report, and it says a high proportion of candidates thought that the depth of breathing decreases during exercise. Please remember one thing. Today somebody was asking me on WhatsApp, during exercise what happens? Your breathing rate increases. It means you breathe faster. Like at the moment you're sitting comfortably, you're breathing say 10 to 12 times in a minute. So saans andar, saans bahar, and you're just breathing in and out slowly. Now when you start exercising, you're breathing in and out more per unit time. It's maybe 20 times per minute. First it was 10 times per minute. Now you're breathing in and out faster and you're taking deeper breaths in and out. So the muscles are contracting more forcefully and creating this change in volume and this pressure change, and that of course results in you breathing, number one, more breaths per minute, number two, deeper breaths. That was short breaths or deeper breaths means taking in a deep breath and then taking out a deep breath. So which changes occur as a person exercises? Depth of breathing increases and breathing rate also increases. So both of these increase, and a depth of breathing decreases. I mean, sometimes you think you're taking shorter breaths. No, 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 no. Just imagine, just think when you're exercising, you're taking deeper breaths in and out. Of course, it's much faster. The diagram shows the kidney and associated structures. What are the labeled this thing? Now you know aorta, the vessel arising from that would be the renal artery, and V vena cava, the vessel arising from that would be the renal vein. The renal vein will be entering the vena cava. So which is the renal vein? You can see which one is the renal vein. This is the renal vein which is entering the vena cava, right? And this is the renal vein which is entering the vena cava. So one is the renal vein, so that is deoxygenated blood. And what is aorta? Let's look at the one with the aorta. So the aorta is this one. and it's going to be coming here downwards. So it's going to be going in this direction, aorta, renal artery, and then this one coming here and going into the kidney. So this is the renal artery. So renal artery will be carrying oxygenated blood. So 2 will be oxygenated blood, 3 is the ureter, and this of course will be carrying the urine. And that was easy for you because now you had to decide only between A and B. Then coming on to question 20. Question 20. What are the responses to decreased body temperature? You enter this room is very cold. Shivering and vasoconstriction in blood vessels near the skin surface. Vasoconstriction means that the muscles in the wall of the arteries, of the skin arteries contract and it becomes lesser blood flowing in the capillaries, so less heat lost. Last question 21. Which process keeps conditions such as temperature and glucose constant inside the body? Homeostasis is the maintenance of a constant internal environment. So, control temperature and glucose and actually water content of the blood as well. So homeostasis, and that was the answer to this. The others were of course all wrong, but if you didn't know this, is maintenance of an internal environment involves temperature, blood glucose, and the blood water content. So that finishes this video, and we will do the next of the questions in the next video.